Hey, Michelle.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Likewise. I'm really sorry
Thank you.
about the loss of a very great friend and very good man. It's good to meet his son. It's lovely that you're on and you very much look like him. It's nice to see you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the kind words. I had the brief opportunity to work with John in the past as a part of, I don't know if you guys know of his company, Center for Greater Good.
Seth, I think I know more about that story than you can imagine.
Okay. So yeah, I lived in Idaho with him for a couple of years and did a lot of research and tying together all of the early childhood outcomes and developments. And we used that to create the Good Life Guidebook. And we then used, well, there was one major project was the Hawaii Kailua Park Terrace renovation project. But that's it was many years ago, so I'm a bit out of touch with this. I work officially as an engineer at Adobe, so I haven't been in the business world for a long time. Yeah.
Right.
He spoke a lot about you, very proud of you, always.
Extremely.
Yeah, he was always doing interesting projects and had his finger in many pots. So
Yeah.
So I think most people know this is not our typical town hall. So if you did come up with a typical town hall, just know that we're here to reflect, to pause, and I just wanted to create this space for Nicole, you, and family and close friends. We've all been co-collaborators, and we'll continue to do it.
I'll tell you, Mark, John always talked about finding a safe space. I think a lot of his life was very tumultuous, especially in his childhood. And, he was always looking for what he called safety. And I know he felt very safe in the 361 community. So it's a safe space.
Great.
A couple of people are texting me that they're hopping on now.
Sure.
Hey guys. Hi everyone.
Hi.
Isabel, my dog Zoe misses you, Isabel.
Oh
Oh,
my god, I missed him too. Her too.
I'll
She's
get her
bad.
out to you. Don't worry. I'll get her out to you this
Better.
summer.
Is
Hey
that
Seth,
Michelle?
one thing hey Mark, one thing I want to maybe ask Seth before we jump into it all is what can we do for him? How do we support him in his journey and make sure he has access to us, and there's anything we can do to support him on his journey? Seth, please do let us know. I echo the words of Nicole and everyone else that said earlier that John always spoke extremely highly of you and always wanted to make sure that your way was made for you moving forward in life, of course. And you're always surrounded by the right people, and Mark's got an incredible network. I think, many of us do on this call, and if there's anything we can ever do to support you, we are just a phone call away.
Greatly appreciate it. Honestly, I have no idea. I've never been through something like this before. I'm just taking things one step at a time, and just trying to, I guess, learn a little bit more about what John was involved with directly, which is why I'm here today with you. But yeah, I have no idea. So, but I appreciate the offer, and if I think of something in the future, I'll definitely keep you in mind. Yeah.
Yes, and Seth and I are keeping in close contact, and I will be planning with Seth. John always wanted an end of life celebration, not a funeral. So in perfect John style, we will put something together. And my thinking is that it will be in February, just with the holidays upon us. And I know a lot of people want to travel from all over the world. So we're going to have to find a big venue. If anybody has thoughts, I'm more than open on that.
I mean, that's a great start. Yes. It's great thinking, Nicole. Yeah.
In New York or anywhere?
I mean, I was thinking New York just as a hub.
Mm-hmm.
Where, people can easily fly in and plan things around it as they need, but would be great.
Brooklyn Bowl.
You know what? He'd love that.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine that manages the Brooklyn Bowl. We could check with him.
That would be really great. Yeah. Yeah, as you know, we're this Michelle Moskowitz and I started working on a list, and even as we were trying to keep it condensed, we were already well over 300 people.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So Mark, if you want, I don't know.
I'm sort of just wanted to create the space, particularly for you to kick off, I guess, a discussion, and this will be one of several, right? This is, we thought about doing it next week, and let's start communicating and gathering and leaning on each other.
So, I would love to say something on John's behalf, and I put something together that I'd love to share with everyone. And I've got to say, I'm really happy to see so many little tiles of faces out there. Some of them are very, very familiar, others are not, but it really makes me realize just how many people John's life touched. And it also does make me think about how deeply talented a networker John was. And anyone who knows John knows that he really liked a good conference or event, and no one could work the room like him. I would come out with a handful of cards. He would have like a suitcase full. So no one forged connections like John. And, as a testament to that, this past week, I've received calls from all around the world, from people of all walks of life. And I've been reminded of just how many people and lives he touched so deeply. I've spent time comforting men who have cried. It's been just a journey seeing, and whether it was people who knew him a short time or a long time, it was always a very similar reaction. And, you know, John was someone who people were truly his passion, and he would so often give with absolutely nothing to gain, whether it was his time, his advice, his support. He was always there for people, giving so much, just so much. I've also spent this week really reflecting on John's life and the legacy he created. And there are a few words that have consistently come to my mind, and that's connectivity and selfless giving. So I want to reflect on his gift and make sure it lives on in all of us. Being conscious and thinking about these things is really important. And it's something John did every morning. He would talk about what he was grateful for. And, you know, life is more than what we do. And Winston Churchill did say it quite well. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And John was truly a giver, a real giver. Interestingly, he had recently asked me to write his bio, and I was so deeply impressed because there really were so many things that I didn't even realize he had done. And I'd like to share a little bit of that. So during his career, John's collective experience spanned 3 continents and 30 countries across North America, Latin America, and EMEA. He worked with and led teams for the US Treasury Department and the White House Office of Social Innovation. He also held positions at KPMG, Merrill Lynch, SAP, and Oracle. And during his time, he saw 2 IPOs and 1 exit. As many of you know, John was building a company called Peak. And Peak was truly based on his life journey, growing up in poverty. John's childhood was far from what I would say was a fairy book tale. He was raised in a trailer with abuse as a near daily occurrence. Having worked since he was 8, John experienced the struggle of so many who are without a meaningful income or a path out of poverty. For John, providing access to resources that unlock the opportunities to achieve financial freedom was really his mission. John wanted everyone with the motivation to succeed to have equal access to the tools and opportunities to achieve financial growth. While John is no longer here to see this mission through, I am going to honor his legacy. And I have formed a recent partnership with Clearbrook Global, acting as a senior advisor, and we will be supporting the growth of companies and products and services that are about making the world a better place. We've made our mission his, and that is creating a way for people to truly align their values, assets, and actions to drive meaningful financial and personal outcomes. I know everyone right now is really looking for the answers, including me, why a life so bright and filled with so much positivity was cut so short. And the only answer that I could find is that John, even while he's gone in body, existed to bring people together and raise the collective consciousness. And things do not end with John. It was always John's wish to do more, to pay it forward and improve lives. So with that said, John passed in Miami. He was there with Angie Connolly, the CEO of a company called Abilitech. We were helping Angie raise funds which are desperately needed by her company. What Abilitech does is it creates, it's an exoskeleton that allows people who have lost use of their arms due to neuromuscular disease, whether it's ALS, a stroke, and it allows them to regain use of their arms. And so that was something John was fighting for and something I am continuing to fight for. I want to help Angie. Her company is in its, the 11th hour. And, whether you have someone in your life who you've seen go through this, there's a true loss of dignity when you cannot feed yourself or open a door. So, if there is anything anyone can do to assist Angie, I would be grateful. And I really am so glad, Seth, that you're here, that you can see how many people are here. And truly your father was the master networker, and you need to really be able to meet all these people and share what they all knew about your father. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to his connectivity and his giving and his heart for looking toward the underdog, the people that are underserved. And, I met John first at the end of August. And we started talking in early November again on a very daily cadence, and his network was incredible. We were able to go to meet a lot of his friends, very quality people, amazing people who are using their resources and gifts to make the world a better place, and to align, including the people that Abilitech serves, people who, there are 3 million people in the US that have arms, but they can't use them to eat or brush their teeth or open doors, turn on lights, and wipe their own face or nose. So I was incredibly touched by John and Nicole's generosity, and inspired by his perpetual energy, was just amazing. He was well loved across the earth.
Thank you.
I just want to add, sorry. Can I add something? Was there an echo?
Yeah, just come over here.
Hi, we're together. Opposite sides of the conference table. One thing, I've known John now about 1.5 years as well. And the thing that always amazed me was anyone we met personally, professionally, how can I help you the most? It was always his first question. And you realize, and after being in a number of meetings with him and encounters, that's how you really open the door with somebody. And he was genuine, right? People will wait until they can talk about themselves and then see what can be done. But he always started a conversation. How can I help you? How can we help you? What can we do? What is it that you
How can we
care
be of
most about?
service? Yep.
And I think someone as a former journalist and working in marketing and for all these years, that ability to deeply connect. And sometimes he had a different way, right? He was a big personality and He was effervescent with his mannerisms, but he really cared and got in there with people, including even recently my son, who's 17. And I said, John, I would love it if you could just talk to him maybe and see about an internship this summer. And he didn't just call him. He went deep in the conversation to say, you know what, I want to know, what does he care about? What does he like? What are his interests? It's not just about the task, it's about the journey. And even, my son, who had only met him a few times, was really moved by that. He was very shocked and saddened about his death. And John really took the time and then followed up and gave him things to read. He's a busy guy, right? And he took the time to do that for my
Always.
son. Just because I asked, that's all. And that really embodies the person that he was, and everyone he came into contact with, whether it was a server at a restaurant, he just wanted to connect. And I'm proud that I got to know that part of him and be with him for the year and a half. And I do believe what Nicole said, that he will live on in all of us. And I hope that we can all carry that forward in our day to day, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's just about the connection and people and the love and the service that we give to each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that story. It's just bringing me down to some nostalgia and some of our nights out and the quirky mannerisms and the fun that we would have. And yeah, it's just thank you for that story. Yeah, appreciate it.
Others?
I just, it made me think, Seth, my father, as I grew up, was a senior investment banker with a big, powerful job on Wall Street. And I used to be upset that we never went to a baseball game. And I used to see him spend all this time with people outside of my family. And as I grew and became a young man and a man, I understood that he was giving to the world. It wasn't that he didn't love me and my family. And we grew very close. We were very lucky. But Nicole and Michelle, your comment made me think, what was the one thing? Because I'm lucky, I meet lots of people and I identified with John immediately. And what was the one thing about John that really, really set him apart in my mind, that was unique in anyone else? Server, that John had almost a fastidious a need to make a difference, and almost, I don't know if a challenge within his mind that he had to, regardless of who it was or what time of day it was, make a difference in everybody's life that he met for the better, which I've never quite met anyone on this planet that felt as strongly and as genuine and with love and intention that John felt it was his mission to do. I think that's the thing that set John aside from anyone I've ever met. And he impacted, I've only known him a year, Seth and Nicole and Michelle know this, but in that 1 year, we were able to achieve so much working together. The greatest pain I have is the fact that I only had wished we had 5 or 10 years. Yeah. And so it's so wonderful that you want to establish this legacy, Nicole, and that you're leading that charge. And so many of us, I think, want to support that because of John's unique, loving, teaching men. I remember one story that he's taught me and men to say, "I love you," to other men, to open up.
That was always weird at first. Yes. Yeah.
But to become comfortable with learning and growing in a way that a lot of people get set in their ways, especially as we age, you know? And so, I grieve. We all hurt. I want to cry right now. I really, miss John like all of us. And, he just your father was an amazing, amazing guy. It is a wonderful honor that you are the spitting image of him, that you have to wear that. I think it's a badge of honor. And he was a handsome guy, so don't be nervous about that. But I just wanted to let you know that he, like you said, I think Michelle and Nicole, he would make the difference in a conversation with a stranger that might impact that stranger's life to take a turn for the better for the rest of his life. And that's a really rare, rare quality.
You know what, Bill? I'm so glad you said that because you reminded me of something, and I'm going to encourage everyone to try this. What John did, and he had me do it once, and it was really awkward for me, but I did it to the greatest effect that I mean, I felt like I had been given a gift. I had a driver, and John would, believe it or not, this was in Necker Island. I was taking a boat, and John said to me, ask the boat driver what his dream is. And I'm like, because John always asked people that. And I felt a little uncomfortable. I'm sitting with the guy. I asked him, you know, so what's your dream? His eyes lit up. And he said to me that was the greatest question anyone had ever asked him. I still keep in touch with him to this day. He just, and he had a dream, and he had a plan, and that, you know, hearing those things and letting people tell you their dreams. So, you know, the next time you get in an Uber or wherever you are, ask someone what their dreams are, and you'll be really surprised. It's a really nice way to pay it forward. And who knows, maybe you can help them. So that was how John lived.
So I'm getting a few questions. Who are we talking about? Some people who just joined the 11 a.m. briefing. So maybe.
Perhaps, we should, Mark.
Well, maybe you could just let people know what the new people who have just joined, why we gathered here for this.
Oh, sure. So everyone that's on and doesn't know, or perhaps you did know John Bellamini. John passed away very unexpectedly a little over a week ago, and we were just having a moment to really honor him, talk about the legacy that he leaves behind. His son Seth is on this call as well. But you know, John lived a very big, beautiful life, and you know, really reminds all of us just what it is to give. So.
And you're planning a number of things, Nicole, to celebrate him and different causes that he stood for, and you'll keep us, you know, I guess something in February that will be sounds
Absolutely.
like large and John-like, and then other things. So just let's collaborate, as I said. And
yes, I truly thank you. And so happy to have had this opportunity to share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for doing everything that you do, Nicole, and taking charge. And I really like the idea of having the celebration of life for him. And that would mean a lot to him. He was very contrarian. So that would have been directly in line with exactly what he wanted.
Cheers to that.
No. So I really don't want to cut this off, but I do know that we're good. We
Yes.
will have a continuation of this. In fact, my team probably warned me I should have done this after the briefing. But every week, 141 in a row, Stephen Burke comes and talks to us about a macro issue, and the theme of it is rather apropos. It's what scares us and excites us. Obviously, you could take it in different dimensions, and one of which life is short. So we've got to really make it count together. I don't know if that's a bullet in your presentation, Stephen, but if you could, you're like Uncle Stephen, right? And even and we're very lucky to have you here. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
And I would just like to say, I'm having trouble getting the screen, Mark.
Oh, that's because I'm sharing. I didn't mean to be. I didn't even know I was sharing the whole time either. Oh well, keep going.
I had only known John for a year and a half or so, and he was in our offices at ARS a month ago, Nicole. And he did bring, John always comes with a conference. So if he's going to a meeting, there's usually 5 or 6 other people that are coming. And I did have the chance to meet Angie Connolly at that time. And Angie has a company that John was getting behind, and it is one that is an important area for people with ALS, other types of sclerosis, particularly allowing them to have use of their arms. Angie's at a key fundraising time for her business. It's a really cool technology. I have not done due diligence on it, but I have met with Angie, and if anyone knows people who would have an interest here, she's in a fundraising mode at a critical time. So if you want to help John, this was one of his projects that he was working on. And if anyone can help Angie out, it would be doing something to continue the work John started there.
Yeah, and I'll just add, and and if anybody has someone in their family and has seen just how debilitating something like ALS or a stroke can be when you lose the use of your arms. My uncle is going through that right now, and he still can use one of his arms, but you see it, and just the lack of dignity and just the being able to do things for yourself is really important. And whether you have a personal calling to do it or a business calling to do it, I urge you to take a look. And that's all I'll say.
I actually have a family member, one of my brothers is actually at that stage where they're wondering, is he being diagnosed with the sclerosis right now? And it is his fingers that are going, and to have that use of his hands is a big dignity issue. So if anyone can help out, Angie, if you could put your information, or Nicole, if you can put the information in the box. It's not a product that Mark can promote because it's not on the platform, because it hasn't gone through all the due diligence. But if you want to help John out, you can do this through helping Angie out with her raise. So do your own due diligence, but it is part of it. And it's a really cool technology for an area that's very important.
But there's one hand up, Clara, if you have a comment or question.
Yes, hi. I met John and Nicole at the World Economy Forum in last January with at the Deepak Chopra event. And I don't know if you remember, Nicole, we have the stem cell company.
Of course, I remember. Of course.
Yeah. And I set up stem cell clinics around the world, and I was so shocked to hear this about John. I'm so sorry. I met you guys again when I was in New York for the 4th of July. I came to your event at the Water Club, and I just had to raise my hand hearing ALS, because we are treating patients with ALS. We have over 10 years experience with stem cells. And I just had a patient here. I'm here in France in the moment. I'm between Cannes and Monaco in Germany. And we had just a patient from France here who was going to New Jersey to be treated by Dr. Milling with ALS. And he was before in India as well. So we have quite experience. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on that platform. I came in late and it's my first time participating, but really my condolences, Nicole, to you and the family as well. I'm very shocked, and if I can help you and if I can, I definitely will reach out and see if I can support you, what you do to keep the legacy.
Thank you, and I'm sure I'll see you in Davos in January as well. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead.
May I
Sorry.
say something quickly? Mark?
But Cam, Janan and Andrew had their hands up.
I'm sorry.
I do want to, I know your story and I think it's a great one to share. I knew this would happen in a way.
It's fine, Mark.
Janan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I really do want to just express prayers and love for you and your family, Nicole. But also just to share, I put it in the chat. If anyone does know someone with ALS, I have a client who is very, I would just say kind of low key, but he is from India originally. He lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He has actually the first only case that I know of with his botanical supplements and treatment alongside a Western physician, but has worked with an ALS patient, and he is now no longer on the scale at all. Like, he drove to my office in North Carolina, and I'm happy to connect. But also I just want to express, please, Angie, I put my email in. I'm happy to make some connections for your fundraising. Please do follow
Janan,
up.
maybe what we could do an event around ALS, for example, a Zoom event. So maybe that's a takeaway. And Andrew, and then Cam, and then Stephen.
Very quickly, I didn't know John, but I'm so sorry for your loss to the community. I do sit on an advisory board for Peter Warlick, who went to Denison, Mark.
Yeah. He was the VP of Treasury of American Airlines.
Correct. So I sit on that board of advisors for a group called Aviators Against ALS. And they've raised upwards of $6, $7, $8 million over the years from the big players in the aviation business. But I'm happy to make an introduction to those that are running it.
And Andrew, can you bring Peter onto this ALS event we're going to now host? He'd be a good speaker. I don't know where his condition at the moment, but
yeah, it's debatable if he's able to carry that out. But there are other folks that could speak on his behalf that are driving this. But Peter, I'm sure would love to participate, if not, if he can't speak, but
in whatever shape or form, that'd be great. And
yeah,
Cam, and we'll turn over to Cam real quick.
Nicole, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say, because when I heard about it, I just went. I just sat down, thought about all my time with John from the moment I met him. And I was with Angie and Bill in Abu Dhabi. It's beyond words how kind he was. And he was a friend, but a coach to me. He spent a lot of time. Polishing, what I would say. So, you had a great dad.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Cam.
Thanks, Cam.
Okay. Oh,
How do you follow that, Stephen? That's
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for all coming today. I don't know what to say other than I reached out to Nicole earlier, and the only comment it would be this is that the world's a lesser place now without him. And I think this community does a great job of supporting the world with philanthropy and other things. And it's a special group of people on the call, and we lost one of our own, and we'll move forward. But let's talk about the economy and what scares and excites us. And rather than jump right into that, a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked a question. I don't know if it was Andrew or Tim or Adam about who do you listen to when the Fed's speaking, and we have a Fed meeting tomorrow. But I really blew the answer on the question. So whenever I do that, since they're recorded, I always like to try and correct it later. So the real answer to the question from my view is it's Chair Powell, obviously, it's Brainerd, and it's Waller. But really the other one that's not listed here, because he's not on the Board of Governors, but he is the head of the New York Fed, would be John Williams, who leads is the vice chair of the FOMC, is very important in rate setting. So those would be the three main ones. Others, Michael Barr's supervision somewhat, but the others will play a role, and then you'll have people like Bullard who weigh in from time to time. But for us, the real message should be really Powell, Brainerd, Williams, and Waller would be the main ones I would listen to going forward. And we will have an announcement tomorrow. It looks like it's 50 basis points. We did see some positive numbers come out today in the CPI, which we'll touch on in a minute. So what scares me, and I'll just start with the word, it's debt. You know, I've talked about this a lot over the year, but we have a growing debt problem. We have a global economy that's roughly $101 trillion in US dollars this year. We have $300 trillion of debt globally, give or take, and global short rates rose 368 basis points this year. So you've added basically $11 trillion to your debt servicing costs on a $101 trillion economy. The implications of that will be there will be a lot of crowding out, and those who have the best needs will be harder to get their arms around. So let's just take a look at this. So a big number, it's grew at a pretty big rate. The positive thing is we had 6% GDP growth last year, which made the debt to GDP start to level off and look more attractive. But, you know, we just had a lot of distortions in the system. So I think that's one of the big worries for me is, you know, a lot of this debt was built on zero interest rates. It was built on the view, and much of it was built on MMT, modern monetary theory, which says debt really doesn't matter if you control the currency. And I think that's there are different views of that, whether you're at a zero interest rate environment or a couple hundred basis points higher. So I think that's one of the big issues that we have to think about. And the fallout from this is pretty significant because debt is the current consumption of your future earnings. You're borrowing today out of your future revenue streams to get something that you think is going to be more productive return for you over a reasonable period of time. The problem with that is not all the debt spend has been very productive and hasn't gotten the return that you need. So for advanced economies, you're creating this higher levels of debt with higher interest rates is going to squeeze capital from the areas that we need to invest to build the economies out. That's a big issue for the advanced economies. It's also one for the developing economies, but they have other problems that are layered on. They don't have the right access to the standards that we accept in the developed world. And that means that money has to go there in addition to going to the other areas that they need to invest in for the future growth. And that underinvestment is going to you get this crowding out of spending, you're getting underinvestment, which is going to compound the problems that these guys face. And just to give you a little sense of the lowest income developing nations, which is a subset of the developing nation group, their interest cost alone year over year grew 35% to $65 billion. These guys can't afford that kind of an increase on their system. And when you have currency depreciation in an inflationary environment with debt and other empowerment issues, you're going to have a developing problem which makes it hard for governments to get longer term policies in place to move the needle forward. And just to give you a sense, most of the surge in debt ratios came from the emerging nations. And you can see Vietnam, Thailand, other nations really picking up a lot of their spend. Some of it's non-financial debt. The other worry that I have for the debt situation is so much debt moved out of the traditional lenders into the private markets, and you have not necessarily the same standards around that debt, which creates other liabilities in the system. And I think that's going to be one of the fallouts from Dodd-Frank, is that we used to know where the debt is and had standards for it. The policies we put in place to address those standards might be being circumvented by debt moving away from those institutions. So debt's a big problem for the world. There's some other ones. One big one for the other scare for me is labor supply and availability. We'll come back to that a little bit later. What excites me, though, is there is a cooling in the economy that's happening at a faster rate than people want to acknowledge. And the reason it's not coming down, it's being acknowledged as much, as you still have wage inflation and some of the other areas that are still keeping the inflationary numbers up. We had an interesting CPI number today. You've had a lot of areas where some of the things that were reflective of an inflationary environment are starting to turn. So let's look at it. Here's the dollar weakening, and just look at it from October to now, a very big move. And that really coincides with when the Fed started to talk about that they're going to be slowing their rate hikes. That would lead to a weakening of the dollar relative to other economies. And that's a big help. You also see it, used car prices coming down sharply now. They're still quite elevated, but prices at the pump have come down about $2 in a very short period of time as well. So you're starting to see areas that were big problems last year becoming, tailwinds for the inflationary story. And then that's then being reflected in the bond market, where yields have dropped from over 4.25 on the 10-year down to, in the high threes at 360, 370. So taking pressure off. You're seeing that with mortgage rates, which rocketed up quite a bit. They've backed off about 50 basis points. So again, a 50 basis point move from the 6% level or 7% level is meaningful. And I think this easing is starting to work through. And you've had these competing forces where the amount of stimulus that was in the system that was creating some of the inflationary pressures, excuse me, particularly the $2 trillion of fiscal stimulus that came in, is now working through the system still, but a lot of the tightening that the Fed's been putting in is just starting to take hold. So you have these competing forces, which is why growth is still relatively okay and why there's good consumer spending on a relative basis still. But you're starting to see people react to the changes that are going on in the markets. The other thing is that's reflected in when you think you're getting to a peak in rates and a peak in inflation, that's more positive for the stock market. You have seen a slight rebound in the stock market as well. So the cooling of the inflationary pressures, to me, excites me because it will take some of the pressures off central banks to continue to put the upward pressure on rates, allow the system to have a shot at a soft landing, but they can't pull back too quickly on what the Fed's doing, or they'll give the inflation a chance to reignite. They need to get this cooling to be more persistent, and it's going to take some time to get there. But the trend is starting to develop where you're starting to see the inflationary pressures come in. So what other things that scare and excite? China scares me in the fact that their reopening could be really bad. Their COVID problem could get run away. Their real estate problem is still bad. They have terrible secular problems with demographics, and their corporations need to figure out how to work in a new environment. That's a big issue for me. The other one I mentioned is labor availability and supply. We could solve that pretty quickly if we had better policies, but I think that's a global issue that we have to deal with, that's creating some inflationary pressures up that we have to address. And I think the worsening social divide in the geopolitics is definitely something to keep us up at night. But our ability to solve the world's problems is there, but we can't do it unless we have greater prioritization. I think the things that the multinational organizations like the UN and others do with their, 120-point programs are all great, but we have to solve the first 5 big ones first. We don't have the money or the wherewithal around the world to deal with this. And if we go into a recessionary period, then countries, instead of thinking about the greater global good, are going to be thinking about getting reelected and dealing with their own national problems. So you really have to narrow the scope of the problems we're trying to solve them, and then move forward and solve the next ones after that. But we're trying to solve too many at once. If we get better focus in the US and other places, we can do much better. I think what's going on with the manufacturing renaissance is real and something we can leverage for the US. And I do think the other side of the China story is when they do reopen, it's going to have a big positive impact on global trade in a short sense of the reopening, like we've seen in other reopenings. And I think that could give a pretty significant boost to not only the Chinese stock market, but to other areas. And just lastly, the key themes for us as we go into next year at ARS are, we think these changes of globalization really need for everyone to rethink their assets, their investment strategies, and to make sure the areas that they're applying capital to are the areas that capital is still going to be moving to going forward. I think there's some pretty significant shifts as we've talked about. I think the other big change is we have to adjust to higher interest rates and higher cost of living, because even if inflation slows, we are moving from really a 0 interest rate, 2% inflation mode to maybe a 4% interest rate, 4% inflation mode. And that's still a very different setup. And then I think what's gone on with sanctions, supply chains, the war in Ukraine and the trade wars that have been going on are going to lead to a reindustrialization of the global economy, again, creating some new opportunities, but also creating some new problems and new markets. So that's how we think about the big themes. I think the areas that are going to attract capital are the ones we need to solve problems for the world: electrification, digitalization, national security, biotech. Those are the areas that I think are going to continue to attract capital. I think you've seen a pullback in valuations that make it much more interesting for a lot of companies, but you still want to avoid the high multiple stocks. And I think you want to avoid many of the particularly low multiple stocks. A lot of them have earned it and don't have the strong balance sheets of the growth that they're going to need. We really like the prospects for North America and resource-rich developing nations, but we are, other than a short-term opportunity for a rebound in Europe and China, we are not very positive on the longer-term prospects of the structural challenges facing those areas. So we think it's going to be very much a stock picker's market against this backdrop. So Mark, I'll stop there and open it up to discussion.
Thanks, Stephen. Questions, comments? Yeah, what scares and excites you?
Yes, Stephen, regarding China and what's happening in China, not just China, but other parts of the world, but primarily China, how would you see the decoupling of these economies? How decoupled are we? I mean, it seems like the American economy is very strong. And the impact that China is having on that seems to be minimal. So my question is, China goes into a deep recession. How impactful will that be on Europe and the United States?
When the second largest economy in the world goes into a recession, and it's been the economic engine for the world for most of the last 30 years, it's hard to say it won't leave a significant mark. The US is, I think you would look at the US as the best house in a bad neighborhood. But that would be it. It would see growth pull in for us considerably if China and Europe go, which is a possibility. But I think China, for all the head scratching policies they've put out over the last year or so, I think everyone gets too quick to just write them off. They have a very robust economy. They have massive reserves. They have a command and control economy that they don't have to worry about Congress haggling over raising debt limits and things like that. So I think they can be very reflexive. And so I think you might have a short-term surprise on China and Europe next year, which then reverts back to longer-term structural issues coming to the fore. But if China goes, the US can't run away on its own without that moving. So.
Thank you, Stephen. One last question. You mentioned social divide. Were you referring to wealth inequality or referring to the culture wars or both?
Both. I think we have a fraying of the social fabric around the world. And as the economic stresses pick up, you'll see the fraying increase. And the other thing that's happening around immigration issues, I think Europe may start to see some anti-immigration sentiment rising as the war continues on in Europe, and then the economic issues of each country come to the fore. It starts to be less, and it goes on for a longer period of time. I think the exhaustion of wanting to help the Ukrainian people versus dealing with your own nation's woes becomes in conflict. And I think leaders then tend to revert to their next re-election cycle. So I think that's one of the worries that I have with the social fabric shifting.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Other comments?
Yeah, I had one, Mark. So Stephen, you had mentioned reindustrialization was one of the subjects that you anticipate is going to be, shaping up in the next year. How do you feel reindustrialization is going to happen in the United States? Because obviously with supply chain kind of exacerbating a lot of our issues, do you anticipate that we're going to start to see more, conventional industries respark capacity in the U.S.?
Well, I think it was last week that we did the reshoring thing, and the numbers are staggering. It's every industry. You're seeing it, but a lot of it is really the areas that have one of two problems: either lockdowns like China, or energy and labor potential challenges in Europe. So I think those two issues are, going to make Europe less competitive from manufacturing in the near term. And longer term, what's their energy supply going to be, and how fast, and what does that mean from a cost basis? And the other issue is the geopolitics of it, making safe and secure supply chains more important than lowest cost and fastest. I think that's a big change, and I think that favors the U.S. manufacturing.
So as to the subject of 361, how do you feel that impact investment is going to potentially spark in support of that reshoring? Or is it going to be pure industries like you're saying with energy and such?
I think the way impact is going to work is more of I think all industries have the opportunity for impact. We don't think we have a common definition of it either, but that's a separate discussion for somebody smarter than I. But I think it's really going to come down to how do companies think about what they're doing. And there is, it's funny, BlackRock, who is trying to take a lead, whether you think they were doing it well or not, they're still having protests outside their building on a daily basis. So I think we got to do a better job defining what impact is, what ESG is, and then you can answer that question better.
So the age of greenwashing is certainly an issue.
Yeah, but I think you have to deal with certain realities. Like, you have to say there's a certain element of when you're making energy transition or a industrialization transition, there are going to be climate issues that you have to deal with up front. There are going to be cost issues and other unpleasant issues, but you have to deal with that in the light of the longer term. And I think that's really the trade-offs we have to make. Do you want to be beholden to the old supply chains? We've seen what's happened to Europe when you're beholden to old supply chains. It's not the place you want to be. So we're going to have to deal with some of the issues of having higher costs and other issues to make the transitions we want to make. And you can't do it as green as everyone wants to do it initially.
Thank you.
And Mark, Scott, I'm just going to put just on the reshoring, Scott, you can see last week's briefing. I just put the link in there.
Thanks, Mark.
What Stephen did, he provided a lot of data around that too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I posted something in the chat box and I would strongly encourage everybody to listen to this guy, Daniel Schmachtenberger. He's really one of the smartest global thinkers I've ever encountered. And he has been talking about this global secular shift that's taking place, go from what he's labeled, and he and his group of really smart people, game A to game B. And everything that Steve discussed, I think, is spot on. And you can see a contextualization of this transition period, which Stephen really talked about some real good detail on, within the context of really what is the implications. And he has an incredible historical context of secular shifts that have happened on the planet, and there's models and examples in the past he cites. He said, you listen to him, and I have to put it on pause. You know, it's an hour conversation. You got to put it on pause and takes 3 hours if you research what he's talking about. He's a really smart guy and extraordinarily well informed. Yeah.
Why don't we bring him on here and you can interview him?
Yeah, I've had some email exchanges with him. I've never spoken to him personally, but I've had some email exchanges with him. I'll try. He is really as big a thinker as, and his thinking is well captured in various others that have had him. This is the simplest one I linked because she was talking to kind of lay people, but you find him on YouTube and you'll see him talking even more details and granular and specifics with other groups as well.
He's a friend of mine, Mark. I can get him if you want.
Oh my goodness! No kidding, William. Holy cow!
He's a great thinker, there's no doubt. I think he's got a few holes in his theory, but he's got some very provocative thoughts.
Oh man, yeah, please do. That'd be
well. Speaking of provocative, I like everyone's provocative input for their predictions here. As you can see, it's 361firm.com/2023. You can see what we did this 2 years ago and we did it last year. And we invite you to, if you want to do a video, you can post it, we'll post it. You can choose any of them. I can put somebody on the spot, but yeah, and then see if you were right with your predictions. But I welcome, we want like a lot of community views. You can do it by the form itself. And we'll post, well, actually, this will be the theme for next week as well. So we get more community, and if you can bring the guy in you're talking about, Daniel, William, that'd be awesome. Our community is our community. We can do things together. Sorry, someone else wanted about to speak. I may cut them off.
You didn't cut me off, Mark, but I did have a question / comment for Stephen. Yeah. I glanced at the yield curve. And it is stunning to see what's happened over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much everything except for the very short end has dropped considerably. So, you know, given the print that we had this morning on the CPI, it's pretty darn interesting. So yeah.
The one thing though, Bill, is I think we're still early in the data points to define a trend yet. I would put it in as encouraging, but I don't think it's going to change Powell's thinking.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're still in for it for a little while, but at least the shape of the trend is, as you say, is encouraging.
The other thing is the announcements from companies around staffing are really conflicting because you have these labor contracts that are being renegotiated with massive numbers of, 5 to 8% a year type numbers of increases. But then you have Goldman Sachs and others saying their bonus pools are going to be cut 50%, 30%, and the like. You're seeing wage increases, hiring freezes, and the like. And they all start to add up to a slowing of the wage trends, whether they're not showing up fully in the numbers yet. But I think in 6 months or so, you're going to see a very different kind of inflation picture if things keep on the trend. So I think there's something really worth watching the rate of change on a lot of these things. It's going to be very important over the next couple of months.
Other comments?
Yes, Mark, or not Mark, Bill, a question for you and Steve. The reverse repos, are those being increased or are they steady? And how effective are they in taking the liquidity out of the market?
This is one of Bill's favorite subjects.
Yes, I know.
Here, let me pull the,
You want to share the screen, Bill?
let's see, sure. Let me get to.
Did you plant this question?
No, he didn't plan it. That's for sure. Okay, share screen, here we go. All
Didn't
right.
mean to put you on the spot there, Bill.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. All right. Did the chart come up for you?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so here's the chart of the current volume of reverse repo that's happening. I think, you know, noticeably you can't even see the curve up until last year, when all of a sudden, you know, the Fed really started to go into action. And at this point, you know, interestingly enough, they were offering only 5 basis points for essentially banks to, you know, park their cash over at the Fed and taking government securities back in turn. You know, now of course it's a lot closer to the Fed rate that they're offering on it. But I think that this is an ace in the hole for the Fed, because if they want to get money back into the system, all they have to do is reduce the interest rate that they're paying on balances held in this repurchase agreement structure. And right now, you know, we are at here we go, just over 2 trillion, you know, dollars that's in here. This is absolutely a, you know, if they reverse this is a great source of liquidity, you know, for the market, where it's previously on the run up here. This was essentially tightening that they were doing by pulling out cash from you know, from bank reserves. And I think the last time we kind of had a vigorous conversation about this was, you know, more towards the early part of this year, and it was only at, you know, like 1.5, 1.4 trillion, you know, things like that. So we've added, so there's like, you know, not quite another $1 trillion that is parked in this reverse repo facility. So again, and this could be done, you know, more or less at the flip of a switch. So you could see a lot more liquidity coming back into the market if the Fed so desires, just by reducing the interest rate that they're paying on these transfers.
Do you expect them to continue?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you expect them to continue this tightening as they raise interest rates by 50 basis points?
Yeah, well, I think you know, this is tied to the Fed funds rate. So to the degree that they continue to increase the Fed funds rate, you know, the repo is going to be attractive, but it's relative to what the banks can do if they loan it out. And that's one of the key things. And I think that's yet another factor that you can see in here, because what this curve is saying is that the banks didn't see a similarly economic return for their balances. So instead they parked it over at the Fed.
Right.
So if, you know, if lending becomes a little bit better, you know, and now we've got an inverted yield curve, so that's not so great. But, you know, but if the banks become a little bit more generous with their lending, then you could see this curve kind of, you know, stay flatter. Because right now, you know, arguably, if you just, you know, just by inspection, so to speak, it's been relatively stable since July of this year. But it's a ton of money. that's in this facility.
Stephen, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think they start to blur, but I think it was 2 weeks ago, Mark, we did the proxy rate from the Fed, San Francisco Fed, it might have been 3 weeks ago. The San Francisco Fed came up with a new number for what they think the effective funds rate is if you factor in the QT, quantitative tightening that they're doing. And remember, we switched from them doing quantitative easing of 125 billion a month to taking 95 billion a month out of the system. So almost a $250 billion swing on a monthly basis. So that's created some tightening where they think the effective Fed funds rate with the tightening is upwards of 650 or so. So very different than the current rate that we're looking at. So that, in the Fed's view, the whole system is tightened up considerably from that perspective. And I think that is going to play into the rate structure over time. It's new because we haven't really done quantitative tightening before. So it's going to be a new exercise to see how it really plays out. But I think we're going to see a lot of distortions in the treasury markets because of that and because the maturities and the roll-offs. And the Fed may actually do a form of Operation Twist where they start managing the maturities by sliding around where they're issuing new bonds and where they're reducing the counts. So that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Good points. Other questions, comments? Or answers to the questions? What scares you? What excites you for 23?
I'll pass on some excitement.
Okay.
I gained from a client last week. He's 79 years old. He's been investing internationally for 40 years. And he points out that GDP of the developing world in the next 10 years will equal that of the developing world. And these 7 billion young people have technology. They see what we got going on and they want it. And he's very, very optimistic that the future of the planet is bright. It's a long-term view. It's not next year. But, it gave me some optimism.
Morocco in the semifinals, give that area some optimism too. It means a lot. It means a lot in those countries to get there. So
absolutely.
Thank you, Stephen. Always, it was a moving tribute to John. Thank you for putting that together, Mark. Thank you for the introduction. Just over a year ago, through the 361 network, always bringing amazing people here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else with a comment, question? What scares and excites?
Morocco scares. That is a hot team.
Brendan Hurley, what do you think?
Scoring a goal against Morocco is proving harder to do than anybody thought. Only conceded one goal so far, an own goal. I definitely will be cheering for them against France, and definitely will be cheering for Croatia this afternoon. But yeah, it's been a remarkably surprising but entertaining tournament.
18 yellow cards, Eddie.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that, but I'm commenting on it. Morocco is the first African country to make it to the last four, and that should excite everyone who wants to be inclusive, because that's an excellent thing. And what I love about this particular cup is that it's so void of any hooligans and other troublemakers, and there's lots of camaraderie that gives me hope.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. There's an image of after the U.S. Iran game where one of the captain of the U.S. team or one of the players was consoling a sobbing Iranian player. And it really speaks to the sport and what can happen in the world today if you get governments out of the way. So I'm really moving, so.
That's right.
Makes for a nice promo for FIFA. The clean board of FIFA.
That would be something to strive for. It's been decades of corruption.
Well, I'm sitting in Germany. We don't have any dogs in the hunt here. But we have two Francophone teams, so the French are happy. Well, I'll just make another plug. If you want to share your prediction, 361firm.com/2023. It's our third year of doing this. Also, your resolutions, the philanthropies you're trying to support, your one word for next year. Yeah, what scares and excites us. So please share. And if you want to do a video, that's even better. That's help our community get to know you. I would encourage that. And I think I had on the screen, Florida is our next big event. If you happen to be in London on Thursday, come join us. If you happen to be in Dusseldorf, come join us. We're here next couple of days. So, oh, Mirjana pops on screen, just on cue.
Hi, everyone. I was here. I was just processing the news about John. Very hard to even breathe. We just started 3 weeks ago before 361 Farms. So yeah, sorry, that's why I had my screen off. I'm here in London, so see you on Thursday.
Mayfair Hotel.
Yeah.
And Mark, I think congratulations are in order from a post in the last couple of weeks for Mariana. Right?
I'm sorry?
Didn't you
Yes.
win some award?
Oh yes, award is announced 24th of February. So yeah, we are the finalists. So I'm very excited about that. And so the finalists for the best business in health tech and well-being in West London. So
Congratulations.
thank you.
Really cool.
Thank you very much.
I just want to test the machine out.
1st of February is out from manufacturing, from production. So, and then we are going through UKCA markings, and then it will be for public testing. And I look forward to seeing your faces when you come out from it.
Yeah, and we'll be in London. We're planning a couple times at large events. The next one is 7th, 8th, just to put on everyone's calendar. If you go to the events page, you'll see it. I'll just throw it on the screen to make sure you have it. And 7th, 8th, there it is. And then you'll see we'll have another event in the fall in September 14th. So I'm here at Michael Spett's office. We're planning to do even more than you see here throughout Europe, as well as Singapore and Zurich. Michael's going to be in Riyadh and Dubai while we're playing pickleball in Miami. And Naples, I should say, we're playing pickleball in Naples and over to Miami. Bill Deichler will have another allocator session in Miami on that 30th. And making another, my colleague here, making another plug for today's the early bird for Florida too. And hotel links are up, at least one of the, not the second one. So we have about 40 hotel rooms. So, and 125 people can be on the pickleball court with us, 35 courts. And we're going to talk about the business of pickleball. I think we should collectively pass the hat and buy a team. We should have a pickleball team. This feels right.
That's great. I want to remind, Mariana just spoke. the interesting thing for me is that John always was a fearless proponent of a relentless proponent of more women in leadership, more women in investing, more women in governments, because that makes the world a better place. And he would always remind you of that as an investor. And so just a little plug for him and for Mariana.
I have to just add one more thing. Thank you, Eddie. When I met him last year, when I met John last year at 361 Summit, the first thing was, I admire what you do and let me help you how I can. And next thing was, he organized lunch somewhere in Midtown, and he brought 3 investors at the table. And I only knew him a few minutes at 361 firm event. And I was really touched, and he explained, and we had coffee afterwards, and we chatted about life and meditation and mindfulness and my depression that I went through before actually building Hangir, and just we bonded very well on that level as well. And I exchanged few meditation tactics that I use as well. And then we stayed in touch, and he would reach out just to check how I'm doing with the fundraising and if I need any help, if I followed up with that investor and that. And yeah, just when you started, when I actually joined this call, I didn't know which John are you talking about? And then I didn't know, no. And then, when I saw his son, who's, I actually thought for the moment that's John. So I'm still, it's, I didn't know him well, but from what I know, and how much we interacted, very limited, but he was just larger than life. So just want to say that.
Thanks, Mariana.